Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to Freedom Brigade Nation. Andrea, we took too long of a break. It's good to
I
see you.
know. Good to see you.
Great. Well, I have a really exciting change. We are going to have a new co host with us. She is a patriot badass. I love her. So, you know how we have Ryan Walters, who I call the Trump of Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So he had on his board member this lady that would not. Go along with the status quo. And so the governor removed her as the board and she became a whistleblower and that whole thing. We had her on the show.
Love it.
And then she has also been the chairman of the board in charge of putting Ryan's new social studies standards, making sure that all the curriculum met that. And if you remember with the social studies standards, it took out all the woke stuff, all the CRT, made sure it
Mm-hmm.
was based on original documentation and not third hand portrayal of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And Kendra is in charge of making sure everything is right on track with that.
That's awesome.
She also agreed to be the treasurer for the state party. She's just an all
Oh,
over
God bless
badass.
her.
She does amazing things. Welcome, Kendra Wesson. I'm excited.
Hey
Hey,
guys,
How are you?
I'm good. I'm not sure I deserve that introduction, but thank you.
All of it's true, right? And she
Yep.
does so much more than just that. So it's just amazing. But and Kendra, tell us before I do that, but tell us a little bit about what you've got going on right now.
Well, like you said, I'm the treasurer for the state GOP, which has been challenging but fun. I've learned a lot. I'm still chair of the state textbook committee. I'm co-chair of the Trump Educational. Um, let's see, the Trump Educational. I'm going to get it wrong, but it's a committee here in Oklahoma to implement some of Trump's educational ideas, and we're having a good time with that. I volunteer at my local GOP, so I really enjoy doing all of these things for our state. I know that Oklahoma is a stronghold for conservative values, and I plan on being in the fight for that.
Amen.
She also coordinates all of our events, Andrea, for the
Oof.
GOP. She got the title of event coordinator too. It's a byproduct of being friends with me. You end up doing
Yeah.
the
I was
crap
going to say,
I want
my
you to.
GOP tried to do that with me too, and it lasted like 2 years. And I was like, but, God bless you.
Yeah, it's hard to tell
It's
charity
hard.
no.
Someone's got to do it.
Actually, if I could just do the event planning, that would be ideal because I
Yeah.
love that so much. I do
Good.
accounting at work, and so it's not like being
Oh, that's
treasurer is,
awesome.
yeah, being treasurer is kind of like the same thing I always do. The event planning has really been fun.
That's awesome. Good for
That's a
you.
lot of fun. Well, Andrea, I keep telling you you're supposed to move to Oklahoma. If you were in
I
Oklahoma, you
would
Yes.
would
love
be doing
that.
so much more with the GOP, I
I
promise.
would love that. I would love to be in Oklahoma. I'm in Nevada, so it's like, I'm going to have to move at some point if they don't get their act together.
Well, man, we need somebody to hold the line in Nevada, please.
Yeah, please.
Uh,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
at least you have Joey there. You do have some
We do
help.
have a lot of good people. Segal Chad is great, and we've got a lot of good people in our GOP, but we're up against a lot. I mean, I'm just saying it's so frustrating being I was just talking to a friend the other day about how he's like, I just want to buy this huge piece of land. There's this big piece of land he's been looking at in Oregon. And he's like, and then that can be our West Coast Mar-a-Lago. Like the
Yes.
West Coast
You know.
needs some like red stronghold spots because the
Oh.
world tries to say that Oregon and Washington, California, Nevada, and all of us are blue, and we're just not. It's just not the truth at all.
Well, the problem is the cities
Yeah,
dictate it for the rest of it. So my husband grew up in Oregon. You're hitting a really sensitive spot.
yeah.
So when we go visit Oregon, I'm like, why are we not living here? This is beautiful. And he's like,
Hmm.
you'll get mad every single day, and I have to live with you because you
It
know
is gorgeous. And I mean,
Portland is
Nevada,
like
people think of Nevada as just Las Vegas, but we're like the most mountainous state, the best outdoors, tons of ranchers. And I grew up in the San Joaquin Valley of California, tons of ranchers, like Devin Nunes country. A
yeah.
lot more rural than people realize. Yeah,
And those places are conservative. And even in
very
most of Oregon
conservative.
is
Yeah.
very conservative. It's Portland that's
Hmm.
running the show. And
Exactly.
so one of my favorite AFLDS is when we went to Oregon and I wanted to go because I knew Antifa would show up. And they did.
Yeah.
They didn't protest as much, but I knew they would be there. And I'm like, I definitely want to be in on that trip. Anyway,
Yeah.
we have another guest with us today, and she is right in there with me and Kendra in the thick of everything. Um, Sarah Burnett has really trained, she trains the parliamentary procedure and has taught the Republican Party, the vast majority of us, how to do the rules and
Mhm.
do parliamentary procedure. They hired a parliamentarian out of Texas for the last convention, and Sarah, every time she argued with her, Sarah was right.
I
Uh,
love it.
she is amazing, and she is the executive director, right? So she was just as crazy as Kendra to sign up and work with me with the GOP on this basis that was crazy. Her and her husband make Christian movies. She's also an overall badass. Welcome Sarah Burnett to the show. Hey, Sarah.
Yeah,
She's amazing. Hey, welcome. We're glad you're on with us.
thank you. Glad to be here.
So you wanted to come on because I affectionately call Sarah a nerd, and she like
Yeah.
loves that, right? Because we both have that aspect to us. Actually, everybody I'm looking at on the screen
Yeah.
this aspect to us
Big
where we
nerd.
like
Yeah.
that. And
Mhm.
I remember when I first started homeschooling and I was stayed at home, I took a job at the church to run the office because I had to have something satisfy that nerd part of me, right? Like I
Mhm.
need the numbers and the paperwork. I had to have that in my life. And so, but Sarah, I know that she is in on the topic we're going to discuss today. And so I'm glad she came in. Sarah, do you have anything you want to tell us what's going on in your world?
Yeah, I'm just, it's been COVID as business owners, COVID had a huge impact on our lives and our work because our work was deemed non-essential by many state governments. And so that was what kind of thrust me into politics because I realized we've got to stand up for our rights and our families and our futures. But I'm so excited for Oklahoma and I'm so excited for who God has raised up in this movement. And I think that together we can do some really great things to preserve that freedom. And my personal passion, like obviously I love parliamentary procedure. And the reason I love it is because it gives every member a voice. Everyone has a voice. It's such a firmly American concept that we all have a voice and we all have something to say and to give. And I just want to bring that to the GOP. And I think that's what we're doing. So I'm just really excited about where we're going.
She's
Love it.
amazing. She's been our secret weapon for a long time. It's becoming less and less of a secret, but she really is amazing. So we have an issue coming up that I know is happening across America, but is really kicking up steam here. Uh, this idea of Convention of States and Article 5 of the Constitution. And so, we wanted to bring on we want to go straight to the source, right? So, uh, Dr. Michael Farris, I really don't even want to introduce him because I'm going to leave out something really important. This guy is amazing. And so I made a couple of notes here, but okay, so the HSLDA, which is the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, they have been so instrumental with empowering people to homeschool and pull your kids out of government schools. We use them as a great resource and as a starting point for a lot of our research when we were putting together the homeschool page for America's Frontline Doctors. I have referenced them for my personal stuff many times. Well, he was the founding president on that and is still head legal counsel to that with that. He served as president and CEO for the Alliance Defending Freedom. And all of the Supreme Court cases, he's going to have to help me remember everything he's done. I will say the most recent case that I am most excited about is where he proved in the Supreme Court that you can have the pastors don't need to be weenies. They can talk politics behind the pulpit. And he was the head counsel on that. And so he's done so much. He's also a pastor, but he can say it better than I can. So it's an honor to welcome Dr. Michael Farris. Hello, Dr. Farris. Thank you for joining us.
Charity, thank you. It's good to be with you. And with all your team here, you got a great team and it's fun to be with you.
It's great. So you got to tell me, I'm so sorry. I wish that I had been at a place where I could be taking notes. When I was talking to you before and I wasn't. Tell us about some of the stuff you've done because I want people to understand you've been a champion for freedom for decades.
Yes, I've been a lawyer now for 49 years. Actually, today's my 74th birthday. I know I only look 70,
Birthday.
but you know, it's
Happy birthday.
um, and the I was the founder of Moral Majority of Washington State, where I grew up. We moved to Virginia in 1983 so that I could be the general counsel for Concerned Women for America, which I did for 6 years. And then the Homeschool Legal Defense Association got big enough that it needed my full-time attention, and so I ran HSLDA until I started Patrick Henry College. One of the biggest building on the college is that photo behind me. That's the Barbara Hodel Center, and I taught constitutional law there, coached the moot court team. While I was there coaching, we won 12 national championships. We've won 2 since then. Beat Yale this last year, and so I've taught constitutional law, practiced constitutional law for 49 years. Then I became the president of Alliance Defending Freedom. We did the Masterpiece Cake Shop case in the Supreme Court, and I argued for my second case, the NIFLA versus Becerra, which is pro-life pregnancy centers having free speech rights in California. Won that case 5-4, and then I retired from ADF in October of 22 and became the general counsel for National Religious Broadcaster. Supposedly my retirement years, but I am lead counsel in the case that you referenced. It's not yet to the Supreme Court. Frankly, it's not likely to get to the Supreme Court, but it's in federal court in Texas right now on pastors having the ability to say what they want to say about candidates, and the IRS can't touch them. There's a pending consent decree on that, and that's my case. I'm lead counsel in it, and we're trying to get freedom. Now, the reality is the rule that has been in practice by the IRS for a long time is pastors can't support Republican candidates. Because if you say anything you want about Democratic candidates, you never get in trouble. But and we filed dozens of video copies of sermons with Biden there, Kamala Harris there, Obama there, Hillary Clinton there in person. When they're in office and when they're running for office, both being endorsed by the pastor, clearly violating the Johnson Amendment, and yet nothing ever happens because they're Democrats. And so that's the rule. So we're taking down the discrimination by saying all pastors can say what they want to say. In fact, we wouldn't have the Bill of Rights if that wasn't the case. The reason that James Madison got elected to Congress the first time is he needed to vote a Baptist in Orange County, Virginia. And they said, we're not going to vote for you because you don't support a Bill of Rights. And he said, okay, I'll support a Bill of Rights. They voted for him. We got the Bill of Rights. We got the First Amendment, thanks to Baptist pastors endorsing James Madison from the pulpit in that first congressional election. So it's a great history. And, I've been doing this kind of work in the conservative Christian constitutional arena full-time since 1980.
Well, I know that. So we have Dan Fisher in Oklahoma, and we are very well aware of the Black Robe Regiment and how the pastors actually very much led much of the revolution, with our founding. So I thank you for your work on that, and thank you for the correction. So you also founded Convention of States, as co-founded, correct?
That's right. Well, about 13 years ago, it basically started on my Facebook page. I was, having taught and practiced constitutional law for so long, and also having litigated an Article 5 case back in the late 70s into the early 80s, when Congress tried to change the rules for the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment, going from 7 years to, they gave them till June 30, 1982, which was about 10 and a half years. So they changed tried to change the deadline by a simple majority vote. And I filed the first lawsuit as a very young lawyer, challenging the constitutionality of that move by Congress. And my case got consolidated with the case that was filed a couple of weeks later by the Attorney General of Idaho and some legislators from Arizona. We worked together as a team, and together the court ruled you can't change the rules for amending the constitutional process in the middle of the stream. So I'm one of the few lawyers with actual Article 5 litigation experience. That case went to the Supreme Court. I filed briefs on the case in the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court ultimately said that the second deadline had passed and still 38 states hadn't ratified, so they ruled the case to be moot. But there have been attempts by Nevada and other states in the meantime to try to ratify ERA in the last couple, 3 years. And the case that I litigated in Idaho in the 1980s has been cited again as not binding precedent, but instructive precedent in terms of that. And the outcome has been the same. You can't change the rules for the process of ratifying or adopting a constitutional amendment in the middle of the stream. And so the 7-year deadline has stood, and the ERA is dead. And that's part of my long history of doing things. I've also been the lead to kill UN treaties, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. I led the effort to kill that. I led the effort to kill the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, not because I don't have a problem with people with disabilities. My mom's been in a wheelchair for a long time. She has MS, but I just think that Americans should make the law for America. And so that's a deep part of my history as well. And I've been at this general conservative Christian legal world for a very long time.
Thank you for your work on the ERA. That's so important. And I think it's so important that our Constitution stays the way that it was intended. And obviously, it's very important for conservative values to kill things that are trying to go around that. So,
indeed. And the reason I started the Convention of States is this. There are effectively two constitutions. There's the Constitution as written, and then there's the Constitution as interpreted by the Supreme Court. And people say we don't follow the Constitution. Well, yeah, we do. We just follow the wrong one. We follow the Constitution as interpreted by the Supreme Court. And there are ways that you can overturn decisions of the Supreme Court. It's very hard. I mean, I led the legal team that was co-counsel on the Dobbs case in Mississippi. When I was the president of the Alliance Defending Freedom, we drafted the law that went to the Supreme Court. We were co-counsel with the Attorney General in that case in the Supreme Court and worked on it, helped them with all the preparation. They did a great job of arguing the case in the Supreme Court. But I helped reverse Roe versus Wade, so I can see what you do. I mean, that took 49 years to do that. It's very difficult. And so there are some things that we just simply need to use the process that the founders gave us. And what they did is the last week of the Constitutional Convention, George Mason stood up and said, look it, guys, someday this government's going to run away and get drunk with power. And I'm paraphrasing, obviously. And when that day happens, if the only way we have to amend the Constitution, which is the way it was in place at that point in the convention, if the only way we can do this is for Congress to propose an amendment, Congress is never going to propose an amendment to limit federal power. Right. And history has proven incorrect. He said we have to give the states the ability to not only confirm and ratify amendments, but to propose them in the first place. And so Article 5 contains two ways to propose amendments to the Constitution. 2/3 of Congress can propose amendments, or 2/3 of the states can call for a convention on a particular subject, and then amendments would be drafted at a convention on that subject. And then it would have to go back to the states to ratify. And I like to say, it's a 3-stage process. Stage 1 is 34 states have to call for a convention on a topic. At the convention, 26 states, one state, one vote, have to approve the actual text to be sent out then to the legislatures, and then 38 legislatures have to vote yes for anything to come. So it's very, very hard to get something good done, but it's impossible to get something crazy through that process. It's just too many structural barriers. But if we're going to do anything about the national debt, runaway federal spending, or like getting rid of the Department of Education, Trump's doing a great job of starting to shut that down. But it's not going to be permanent unless there's a structural change. We could, at the convention that I'm trying to help happen, put a permanent resolution in the Constitution that says education is the exclusive authority of the states. There shall be no federal Department of Education. Obviously, that wouldn't be the actual precise text, but that's the gist of it. And that could be made permanent. But it can only be made permanent when 38 states ultimately say, yes, we want education to be within the province of the states alone, and we don't want the federal government. When that happens, we've made history. We've done things. And there are other things that we could do that would be relatively easy. For example, only 9 justices on the Supreme Court. That's not in the Constitution now. That's in a federal statute. Congress can change it and be guaranteed if the Democrats can control the White House, the Senate, and the House in a future day, then they are going to pack the Supreme Court. And when they do that, here's what's going to happen. Our gun rights were held to be personal rights, not militia rights, by a 5-4 Supreme Court vote. And the first thing that will happen by a Supreme Court is they will take some gun rights case from some left-wing state, and they will reverse that 5-4 vote, and it will be a 7-4 voters, whatever they do to pack the court. And our gun rights are going to go away if we don't put 9 justices on the Supreme Court into the text of the Constitution. We have got to do that. And that's, again, something that can happen with the Convention of the States process, which Oklahoma has already approved. Oklahoma is one of the 19 states that the legislature has approved this. And so we're thankful that Oklahoma has done that. And, obviously it's all Republican controlled states that have done it. And the Democrats stand strong against us. Common Cause stands against us. All the left-wing groups stand against us. Former Senator Durbin has written a book against us. And so they say the biggest threat to their way of life is the Convention of States process. And they are right, because we can bring Trump-style, DOJ-style corrections to the federal government and put them on a permanent basis in the Constitution. And they fear that greatly.
So I know that Tom Coburn led the charge in Oklahoma, correct?
That's correct.
And we're grateful for those efforts. Now we have the John Birch Society very active in Oklahoma right now, trying to get that support repealed. Can you tell us, because you used to be a part of the John Birch Society, can you tell me why they are opposing Convention of States now and what the turn was? Because I know that you were a part of that, correct?
Well, they loved me. They wrote articles about me. I've never been a member of the John Birch Society.
Okay.
But I was interviewed by their newspaper on a pretty regular basis. They love my work in homeschooling. They love my work in killing all these UN treaties. They called me one of the best constitutional lawyers in the country. But when I started the Convention of States process, they changed. Now, interestingly, I was actual friends with the second president of the John Birch Society, Larry McDonald. He was a Democrat congressman from Georgia, and I worked closely with him. But both the first and second presidents of the John Birch Society supported the Convention of States idea and used this methodology of Article 5 to get several states to pass resolutions calling for a convention to pass what they called the Liberty Amendment. It was a good idea. There were good things, repealing income tax and some other things that were in the Liberty Amendment, and they worked in the 60s and so in that era and got several states. Wyoming was one. I don't know for sure if Oklahoma was one. Might have been, but several state legislatures adopted the Liberty Amendment as a result of the work of the John Birch Society. But the current people who run the John Birch Society have repudiated not only what the founders of the country have said, they've repudiated what the founders of the John Birch Society said. And the person that they bring on to debate me or contradict me is a house painter. He's not a constitutional lawyer. He's never fought for anybody in court. He's never gotten any laws passed. He's never defeated any law. So he's never defeated any treaties. He paints houses for a living, and he says that he has no special skills except the ability to read. Well, I have news for him. He hasn't read enough. I've written an article. One of the big contentions of the John Birch Society is the Constitution of the United States was illegally adopted. That's their contention. They call themselves constitutionalists, but they say two things. One is that the Constitution was a result of a runaway convention. And secondly, that the ratification process was improperly adopted. Not only did the delegates disobey their instructions concerning what they were supposed to do in Philadelphia, but the process they used to ratify the Constitution was illegal. Now, I wrote an article to answer the left-wing Democrats who also make this argument. So there's two groups, left-wing Democrats and the John Birch Society, make exactly the same argument that the Constitution was illegally adopted. But they're both wrong historically as well as legally. The reality is the only amend the Articles of Confederation language that they rely on came from a resolution by the Articles of Confederation Congress, which was giving their opinion about the upcoming convention. It wasn't the call of the convention. The convention was called by the states. Virginia was the first state to call the convention. 12 of the 13 states put out calls for the convention. Rhode Island never participated, but the others did. And all but 2 of the states essentially, well, none of them exactly said this, that the purpose of the convention was to render the federal constitution adequate for the exigencies of the Union. That was the call of the convention. Secondly, Connecticut paraphrased that, and Massachusetts said, render the federal constitution adequate and only amend the articles. So they did both, which is kind of a little bit strange. And New York said only amend the articles. Now, you can read my article. If you Google defying conventional wisdom and put my name, my Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy article that's published by that the most conservative, highest ranking law review in the country, which is the Federalist Society at Harvard Law School's publication. You can read all the details in great way. But the bottom line is the delegates obeyed their instructions from the states. And then secondly, on the ratification process, here's how it worked. The Constitutional Convention ended with 2 documents, not 1. The first document was the Constitution. The second was the proposed new ratification process. And the Constitutional Convention sent that to Congress as they were required to do by the call of the convention. Congress unanimously approved only the new process. They were not called upon to approve the Constitution one way or the other, but they unanimously approved the new process, switching from state legislatures to state ratification conventions, switching from 9 votes, excuse me, from 13 votes to 9 votes to get started with the Constitution. Then the convention, Congress did not send that document to the conventions. No, they sent it to the state legislatures, which was the old way of doing things. First you went to Congress, and then you went to the state legislatures. All 13 state legislatures approved the new process. So yes, a new process was adopted, but it was adopted using the old process first. They lawfully changed the methodology from the old way of doing it by state legislatures to doing it by conventions. And then they used the convention in 9 states. The Constitution became effective with 9 states, but it didn't really get started until 11 states had ratified. And North Carolina and Rhode Island came in pretty quickly thereafter. But they followed the law in every case. And it just boggles my mind that the John Birch Society calls himself constitutionalist and yet says the Constitution was illegally adopted. No, they don't say in those words, but when you say it was improperly adopted by a runaway convention, it wasn't ratified correctly, what you're saying is illegally adopted. That's like saying, I'm a Bible-believing Christian, but the Bible isn't really the Word of God. It was just some stuff some men wrote, and we don't know if we have a reliable text or not. It wasn't properly written. It wasn't properly adopted. You can't be a Bible-believing Christian and doubt the legitimacy of the Bible. You can't be a constitutionalist and doubt the legitimacy of the Constitution of the United States. I don't care how much fundraising you're doing on this subject, which is what they're doing. They use this issue to raise more money than they raise anything else by scaring people to death. And what's happened, let me just tell you how this has worked. Phyllis Schlafly, bless her heart, she and I worked together closely on many, many things. We were good friends. We disagreed on this issue. She was on the bicentennial of the Constitution. Warren Burger, who believed the Constitution was illegally adopted, even though he was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States and Chairman of the Constitution, the Bicentennial Commission, he convinced Phyllis Schlafly about this runaway convention idea with the arguments I've just laid out. There were 19 states at that point that were calling for an Article 5 convention to reverse Roe versus Wade. Phyllis, working with with Warren Burger's letter, got 6 states, working with the John Birch Society as well, got 6 states to repeal the call for convention to reverse Roe versus Wade. If that hadn't been done, we could have gotten to 34 states within 2 or 3 years. And Roe versus Wade would have been reversed 30 to 40 years earlier, or 30 years earlier, at least. Millions and millions of babies have been killed by using this runaway convention article, and the people that did that have blood on their hands. That's the reality. Now, there's still 13 states that have reversed Roe versus Wade Article 5 convention calls on the books, but 6 states rescinded it. And if we listen to these people, they're just, they don't make sense. They don't make sense with the founding fathers. They don't make sense with the founders of the John Birch Society, and they don't face up to the reality that they have the blood of millions of babies on their hands by making these false, historical, anti-historical arguments about Article 5. The founders gave us this for one reason. The federal government, when it ran away with power, needed to be checked. My wife and I have 10 kids. I think I understand pretty well what would happen if you didn't discipline kids. And when the states who have the power to discipline the federal government don't do it, what do you get? You get runaway madness. And we need to stop from allowing this runaway to continue and continue and continue. Tom Coburn loved to say it wasn't really like 30 or 28 or whatever the right number was at the last time he gave a speech on this. $1 trillion that was the debt. It was more like 140 trillion. It's probably closer to 200 trillion now, because they don't count all the money they've taken from the Social Security Trust Fund and so on. And so if you put it all together, we have stolen the future of our kids and our grandkids. And with 10 kids, I've got 31 grandkids and 2 great grandkids so far. And
that's awesome.
It's just wrong what we're doing, and we got to stop it. And our ability to stop it, and the people that are telling lies about the founders, about the Constitution, and the legitimacy of the Constitution need to be stopped dead in their tracks.
Well, people get so confused. I mean, I know Tom Renz was just talking about the case in Maryland with the Trump administration. Sued the entire bench, federal district court in Maryland. The court ruled that this case cannot move forward and dismissed it. And he's kind of complaining about how he would have been sanctioned. And we talk about kind of the 2-tiered justice system. And I think a lot of, like what you just explained, a lot of Americans don't understand the importance of keeping the states, like you said, active in their role at checking the government and making sure that it doesn't get out of control. And I think that's the frustration for me, is so many people who don't understand the Constitution and what the checks and balances were really there for. And it's like, they're kind of like, oh, screw the man, but they don't know who the man is. It's like, no, you need to stay active in your state and control that, so that then it also goes to where we control the federal government and it doesn't get out of hand and we don't have this corruption everywhere.
Well, we're supposed to be sovereign states, right? And not federal territories,
Yeah.
which is why we started the brigades, right? Because it's empowering people to take back their local communities. Because if the people are in charge of their communities, then they can be in charge of their states, which what we've got it backwards. And it's been purposely propagandized like that, where we think of the states as federal territories, but that is really not the case at all.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
No, I'm agreeing with you. So I'm just amening you. Go. You can keep preaching.
I'll go for an hour. So go ahead.
Let me switch from advocate to constitutional law professor for just a second.
Great.
There really are 2 provisions in the Constitution that are behind the vast majority of the false grabbing of power by the federal government: the Commerce Clause and the General Welfare Clause. And both of them, the ultimate right meaning of both of them is very similar. The Commerce Clause was meant to give Congress the exclusive power to regulate interstate shipping. So if some of you may have read, your parents taught you oldies music, Dionne Warwick, Trains and Boats and Planes. That's what it is. The Commerce Clause is trains and boats and planes when they go across state lines, the trucks too. But when it goes across state lines, that's what Congress has the power to do. Keep in mind, it's an exclusive power. Only Congress can regulate interstate commerce. So can states regulate education? Well, of course they can. Can they use the Commerce Clause power to regulate education? Well, they do, but not legitimately, because if the states can regulate it, it's not commerce. Is manufacturing interstate commerce? No, it is not. Why? States can regulate manufacturing. Is agriculture interstate commerce? No, it's not. Why? Because states can regulate agriculture. Anything the states can regulate cannot be regulated by the federal government using Commerce Clause power. Similarly, the General Welfare Clause is adopted not as a grant of government spending power, but as a restriction on government spending power. When you're spending money for one of your enumerated purposes, support the military, protect the borders, you've got to do it in a way that supports the general welfare, not some private deal between two buddies, or not some local deal that's just going to support some locality. You've got to support the general welfare. That's the principal meaning. But there's another test that kind of is proper to do that, and that is this. If the states can spend money on a topic, then it is not within the competence of the federal government to spend money on that same topic under the General Welfare Clause. You just can't do it. If the states can do it, the federal government can't do it. If the states can spend money on education, the feds can't. If the states can spend money on welfare, the federal government can't, and so on. So if the states can regulate, the feds can't. If the states can spend money on it, the feds can't. That's how it's supposed to work. But the Supreme Court has messed all that up, and we can fix that with this Convention of States. That's how we do it. Now, in terms of states, there's ways that individual states can resist certain things, and they should. But to truly nullify a federal law can't be done by one state. Now think of this. California doesn't like the case that I won in the Supreme Court of the United States, saying that pro-life pregnancy centers cannot be forced to deliver pro-abortion messages to every woman who walks in the door. I won that case in the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, the California Attorney General is trying to nullify that decision and trying to disobey it and going against it. Well, he's going to lose eventually, and his latest efforts are going to be taken back to court. They don't really support the rule of law. When they lose a case, they keep resisting and trying to disobey it. But he'll lose in the end. But if California could nullify federal actions, he could nullify that. Hobby Lobby doesn't have to pay for abortions in his healthcare. Why? Because of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. By the way, I'm the guy who named the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. I was the co-chairman of the group of lawyers who wrote it in Congress, and it passed in 1994. And so can California nullify the Religious Freedom Restoration Act? If California could nullify that federal law, then they could force Hobby Lobby to pay for abortions for their employees in California. No, it doesn't work that way. But when 38 states get together and say, we want to nullify federal law for once or for all, that works. The states working together can get rid of any federal power except one, and that is they can't take away the equal representation of the states in the Senate. That's off limits. No amendments can be adopted on that. But other than that, 38 states could change anything. Now, will they? No. They will change things modestly because the state legislators aren't crazy. A lot of crazy things get filed in the federal government legislature and Congress and the state legislatures as well. But they generally don't pass, except in crazy places like California and New York. But normal places don't pass laws like that, and you can't get crazy laws ratified in 38 states. Just not possible. So can you do some really good things? Yeah, you can. It'll be hard work, but we can do it, and we need to try, because it's on us to stop this runaway spending, runaway power grab. Let's get the Commerce Clause and the General Welfare Clause back to the original meaning, to say if the states can spend money on it, the feds can't. If the states can regulate it, the feds can't. That's the big goal of the Convention of States, and we need to make that a reality.
I love it. It's the power of the people. That's what it's supposed to be. That's how our country was founded. Even even in the Republican Party, right, which is a much smaller scale, we're making committees and people are saying, well, what happens if you get rogue people running those committees? I'm like, well, if rogue people are in those committees, that means they were elected there. And as long as you've got a system that's fair with the way they were elected in, then they're reflecting the people, and it always should. I'm not trying to, in any way dictate what the values are. I just want to make sure that it's the will of the people. And that's what you're saying with Convention of States is let's make sure the people are still in charge through the states.
Exactly. Now, here's how it would work. When 34 states, we're at 19 right now, when 34 states agree to a convention for the purposes of imposing fiscal restraints on the federal government, limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and imposing term limits on federal officials. Those are our three topics. When those three things are approved by 34 states, then all 50 states will send delegates, one state, one vote, to vote on amendments on those topics. Now, 34 states said, we want to reduce the power of the federal government. 16 states didn't vote on it. Some of them are going to be opposed. Some of them are going to be neutral. Probably a few will be in favor. Okay? But it's 34, you know their votes because they said we want to reduce federal power. You can't lose when you stack the deck that way in the first place. And you can only stack the deck in that first when you've done the hard work to go state by state by state to make the case that we should reduce the power of the federal government and let the states have their rightful place in our country. That's what we need to be doing. But it's you take the votes and you send the people. So the idea that California could take over, well, no, they can't. Just count votes. California gets one vote. New York gets one vote. Texas gets one vote. Oklahoma gets one vote. Count the votes. And so, people in any political process, and then they say, well, no, the convention can make any rules they want. No, they can't. The Republican National Convention can't pass laws for France. And the Republican National Convention can't nominate the Democratic candidate for president. The Republican National Convention has a call, and they can only do things that were within the call. And so it can't pass laws for France. It can't nominate Democrat candidates. It can do things that are within the call. And so if you call a convention to limit the power of the federal government, that's what you're there to do. And you've got 34 states lined up saying that's what we want to do. So you've got the votes to get the general thing done. Now, there'll be debates about the wording of it. How long should term limits be? Should it be 12 years? Should it be 16 years? Should it be 8 years? What should it be? There'll be differences of opinion on that. But the idea that term limits should happen, you send 34 states in and say, we want to make term limits happen. And not just on members of Congress, but on federal bureaucrats like Dr. Fauci. And,
right.
and so that's the kind of thing that we need to be debating. And it'll be the greatest civics lesson in the history of our country. I don't know how many of you remember this, but I'm friends with Ollie North. In fact, I got close to buying the house next door to his at one time. He then moved and I ended up buying a different house. But I've known him for a long time. When he ran for U.S. Senate, I had just run for lieutenant governor. So I campaigned with Ollie many, many times, and we're good friends. And so when he was first brought before the House and Senate committees on the Iran-Contra thing, people had not heard directly from Ollie North up until then. They had only heard him through the mainstream media, and America was divided what they thought about Ollie North. And then there was 8 hours of hearings, and Ollie North was answering questions for himself without any media filtering. And before that, America was split, and the senators and congressmen that were questioning him were beating the living daylights out of him. But America listened, and they learned, and they loved Oliver North. The senators and congressmen that were beating him up got overnight calls that were so fierce against the congressman that the next day they were all, oh, Lieutenant Colonel North, and they were so solicitous of it. The people watched the thing unfiltered. When the public gets to see unfiltered 3 or 4 months of debates about why only the state should be regulating education, why only the state should be regulating these things. It'll be the greatest civics lesson because the filtering will go away and people like me will get to stand up and argue why local government is the best government, and we should take away federal power, and by taking away federal power, that returns power to the states and localities. And so it will be a great civics lesson, because the vast majority of people, left, right, or in between, they like the idea of home rule better than they like your idea of distant rule. You know, Berkeley, California would rather make laws for Berkeley than having Trump's Washington, D.C. make laws for Berkeley. I get that. And Oklahoma would rather have Oklahoma make laws for Oklahoma than Biden and his team making laws for Oklahoma. And so I get that. And that's what we will make happen. There will be a whole lot more of local and home rule and state rule, and a whole lot less of Washington, D.C. That will be a great thing.
That's amazing. Kendra, do you have any questions? Sarah?
I'm absorbing. A lot of the conversation I hear is that if we open that up, the subject matter can be changed, and they can pull any subject matter into that convention that they want to.
Well, there are at least 3 reasons that can't happen. You know, can somebody try it? Sure, somebody can try it. Just like, you know, there was an amendment called for one time to adopt a world government. Yeah, okay, you can drop that in if you want. It ain't going anywhere. Okay, but the parliamentarian would have to rule it out of order because it's inconsistent with the call. It will also be inconsistent with the rules. There'll be a preset set of rules, and when the states vote the rules in, the first rule will be you can't change the subject matter of the convention, and that will be wired in advance, because you have 34 states coming in saying this is what we want to talk about. So number 1, the rules will say so. Number 2, the call will say so. Number 3, you can't ratify it. If they go outside that, you can't get it ratified, because 34 states said, no. We called it for this purpose. If you try to change it for that purposes, you tell me how you're going to get 38 states to ratify it when you're going against the will of 34 states again. And the last reason is I will sue them. And I filed the first lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of the Equal Rights Amendment when they tried to manipulate the process there, and I won. And so I've got a track record of doing this, and I'm not yet too old to do it successfully. Now, if I am too old when it actually happens, I've trained a whole bunch of lawyers at Patrick Henry College. There's one that's the state solicitor general of a Republican state right now. One's been the state solicitor general. My graduates have now argued 7 cases in the Supreme Court of the United States, and many have clerked for the Supreme Court, many have clerked for other. I've been training a farm team for a long time. I can replace myself with at least 50 people. If I'm too old or I'm gone, my farm team will come and they will sue them.
So you're saying it would be illegal. They can't do it. It would be against the rules. Right.
Absolutely. It's a rule. So
we understand that, Sarah, because we do that with a lot. You can't, there are certain things you can't do if it's not on the call.
Right. How is the call from the bills from the state legislatures, or is the call triggered after the 34 states sign on?
The call is made, the technical call is made by Congress, but the historical documentation demonstrates that Congress has only a ministerial role, not a discretionary role. And that, so they must call it when 34 states agree on the same subject. There are 450 calls for convention in the history of our country. There are at least 300 of those that are still valid right now. Now, they're still valid until one of 2 things happen. If a deadline is put into the call, it's gone. If, you know, in the state resolution, if the state said there's a deadline, there's a deadline. Or if a state rescinds its call before there's 34 states, that rescission is valid. And so using that that approach, there's about 300, more than 34 states right now. Well, we've never had a convention. Why not? Because we've never had 2/3 of the states agree on the topic. Agreement on the topic is an absolute historically grounded requirement. How do you determine the original meaning of the Constitution? History. History has taught us that you have to have an agreement on the topic to have a call. Congress has no discretion. When 34 states agree to the call, you call it. We're at 19 states. If 34 states did it and Congress refused to call, I could sue them and sue them successfully because they have a ministerial duty on a discretionary duty, and they have to call it. The historical record is absolutely clear on that. So Congress would call it, and then the states would run everything. That's how it works, and it's one state, one vote, with 34 states who agreed to it in advance, being well more than a big enough block to control that everything that's happened, because it takes 26 states to do something at the convention. So that's how it works.
So if you've got 34 states, right, and I really like this, but if you had 34 states running the convention, right? I can't imagine having 34 people in a room and getting, okay, nobody's in charge. We're just going to run this thing. So somebody has to be administering. Is that Congress that says, here's the rules, or is there like a meeting ahead of time where you agree on the rules? How does this work?
The states, all the states would technically be welcome to come, but the 34 states basically need to caucus ahead of time. And,
okay. Yeah.
And they would have prepared a set of rules, there are ways that states could wire this in advance, and that I don't want to go into the detail now because I'm not ready to completely launch it, but we're coming up a way to really cement this down so that there's no question about it. But
sure.
but basically, the 34 states caucus, they choose a chairman, they choose a set of rules, and then they go into convention with the votes already wired, and they vote. And so when you've agreed to things, then that's how Republicans choose a chairman that way. You choose a set of rules that way. It's exactly the same process as a political party choosing delegates. And by the way, there are innumerable interstate conventions, interstate compacts, I should say, where states have gotten together and agreed on, the average state is a member of about 50 interstate compacts. And how do you pick the governing mechanism for these? How do you decide? Every single one of them is one state, one vote, with one exception. That's a nuclear waste compact. They gave the states that accept nuclear waste one extra vote. And other than that, every single interstate compact that's ever been in existence in our country is one state, one vote. They figure this out. States get together, they create a mechanism, they pick a chairman, they adopt a set of rules, and they run it. But it's under the framework of the compact that started first. Just like here, it would be the call starts it, and there will be a meeting, a caucus ahead of time to pick a chairman and vice chairman and chairman of there'll be committees, at least 3 committees, one on fiscal restraints, one on reducing the power of the federal government, and one on term limits. You pick chairman for those committees. There might be subcommittees, you pick chairman. So, you learn how to share the power by giving various chairmanships to people who are part of the 34, and you go run your convention. And it's been done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, both in interstate compacts and in other interstate conventions of various kinds. Not an Article 5 convention, to be sure, but other state conventions. And there's never been a problem with the process. We work it out. We know how to do this.
I find this fascinating. I appreciate your time today for coming on. Does anyone have any last words they want to throw out? This hour has flown by.
It's educational. I was taking notes.
I was too. I've got pages of notes here.
Well, I think it's also very uplifting. And I just, again, through that educational piece, there's power. There's so many people that feel powerless and they don't really understand how things operate in our government. And with all the corruption that we see in the courts and beyond, it is hard to sometimes understand how you beat this evil. And we know our Constitution was written in a way to make sure that we, the people, have power, but we only can harness it if we know how to harness it. So
that's right. Well, guys, if you're not sure what to do, we are at war. We have been infiltrated. We take back the republic by taking back our communities. You have a role, you have a way. We've organized. Go to freedombrigades.com, sign up. We want to help you take back your community, and we will see you next week.
God bless.